Well, thanks, Teresa. Thank you, Molly. We'll jump to weather here, and as you will see, this is a very straightforward forecast. If you like the last couple of days, you're going to like the forecast. It's not very often where and it's pretty much widespread across the whole state as well. So lots of consistency in our outlook, and that direction certainly is warm and dry. That's a very high likelihood of what most of the next upcoming week will look like. But let's look at the last week, and we had beautiful weather several of the days, but it turned out to be, as we talked about last week, a significantly cooler than normal week. There have not been many of those during the 2024 growing season, but this past week certainly was one of those. The far left-hand side here, you can see that that was true over almost or much of the upper Midwest, certainly the Great Lakes region. Our mean temperatures for the week generally from about 2 to as much as 5 or even 6 degrees Fahrenheit below the long-term normal. So a pretty cool week. We had northwesterly flow aloft and Canadian air for much of the week here. That has all of that has shifted to our north and east, and of course now we're under the influence of a big upper air ridge with warm air, and so a little bit of a opposite direction in terms of temperature. It was also for most of the state, other than the western Upper Peninsula, a pretty dry week. And in the middle here, you can see our weekly totals range from less than a tenth of an inch over large areas of lower Michigan, especially in the north, and then again in the far south. A little bit more in central lower Michigan, but still below normal. But again, most of the states observed the totals for the week were below normal. And on the far right-hand side here, if we look at the last month of departures, except for western upper Michigan, which ironically is one of the drier areas of the state long term, where the rain is not all unwelcome, but drier than normal conditions. Some cases less than half of normal here over the last month to 6 weeks. So that is certainly a trend we've seen over the last several weeks. For degree day totals, not many big surprises here, even with the cooler than normal week. We still have some deficits in seasonal totals. This goes back, the seasonal totals here refer to the beginning of May through the present. And you can see for northern parts of the state in central and western upper Michigan, we still have some minor deficits. 50 to 100 units. That's not huge, but we still have significant surpluses over most of lower Michigan, especially across southern parts of the state, where some of our surpluses are in excess of 150, even 200 units. So again, our phenology for most areas, most growing areas, has been advanced this year with extra heat, extra growing degree, and a lot of that goes back to earlier in the season. But even with a cool normal week, we still have surpluses there. So really, most crops have advanced beyond typically or ahead of where they typically are at this time of the year. Well, let's look at the forecast. As I started with, a couple things of note here. This is looking at average condition, well, basically averaged for the next 5 days. And there's a couple things going on. One is, what about the big question mark, the remnants of Hurricane Francine, which made landfall as a Category 2 hurricane last night or early last evening in coastal Louisiana. And the trajectory of Francine, at least if you looked at it and you looked at the radar and so forth, you'd say, "Wow, that's headed towards us," and it is headed towards us. But down here in the bottom, the middle, this is looking at the upper air forecast here for the next several days, and this blue area down here, that's actually is the circulation associated with Francine, which is a tropical system. But to the north of that, the mid latitudes and the jet stream, we've got a big ridge parked up over eastern Canada and eastern North America, and basically these two are going to duke it out to see who influences who, and that ridge is acting a little bit like a force field, if you want to think of it that way, meteorological force field. And yes, the remnants of Francine are going to approach or at least head in our direction, but they're not going to make it. That's right now I think the bottom line. And so we might see some clouds, some high level clouds here today and tomorrow with the remnants of Francine, I think that's going to be about it. The precip probably will not make it much past the central parts of Indiana. It'll advance to the north, but so we are looking at a very dry and also an abnormally warm forecast here as we sit under that ridge. That's a typical type of weather pattern we would associate with that upper air pattern, and that's certainly what we're going to be looking at. The other charts on here on the left-hand side, these are forecast temperature departures over the next 5 days, and you can see over much of the central part of the whole continent of North America, much above normal temperatures are likely. And then on the right-hand side here, these are precipitation totals relative to normal for the upcoming week, and the yellows and browns here are all drier than normal. So very, very, I think, high confidence outlook here for that warm and dry direction, which is again where we started with today, and that's the theme of the forecast. Here's the map as of this morning, weather map, and again, high pressure over us right now. Underneath that ridge, there's a frontal boundary, a weak one up along the U.S.-Canadian border. That's not going to really have any much of an influence at all. And then again, down to our south, here's Francine, which is now a tropical depression. It will continue to weaken today. It is moving northward. It'll be moving through Mississippi today, but slowly and gradually dissipating as it goes. There will be more heavy rainfall down across the south, but it just is not going to make it that much further north. Now, I also threw this in here because we've had a number of questions during the season about the Northern Lights in Aurora Borealis, and Mother Nature is cooperating. There's a geomagnetic storm, or actually one that has taken place over the last 24 hours. It's not a strong one, but it might allow some people in Michigan, the northern tier states in the U.S., to actually see some aurora here tonight. And it looks like in many areas there might be a few clouds, but we should have mostly fair skies. And the best chance to see that would probably be late evening from around 10 p.m. to around 2 a.m. if you're up at those hours, whatever you might glance in the north, if again, especially if you don't have lights there. But so we might see some northern lights here tonight, just as an added diversion, if you're interested. By tomorrow morning, on a weather map, back to our surface weather here on the Earth's surface, Francine moves up. You can see just up to northeastern or northwestern Mississippi, southwestern Tennessee, and other than that, high pressure continues its grip over us. And finally, by Saturday morning, more of the same. Very, very persistent type of pattern. And again, you can see some of that green there. Some possible light rain. Those are remnants of Francine. But because of the high pressure, because of that upper air ridge, it just is going to really have difficulty making it, I think, into Michigan. So our best bet right now, I think, is to go with the fair, warm, dry outlook. It could change, but it's fairly likely though that we just will not, other than a few high clouds, we won't see anything from Francine, and that system actually will dissipate. It'll be gone here by the end of the weekend as time goes on. So that is, and we can multiply this and into through the weekend into early next week. Looking at precip totals, this is the weekly total, and we've seen this a couple times this year. We don't see it very often, but notice that for much of Michigan and these parts of the Ohio Valley, there's no color here, and so really no precipitation is forecast. And that's, in our climate, that's something we don't see very often, but it is for this outlook, for this jet stream situation, it's probably warranted. Maybe a little bit of light rain, a couple showers possible across northern parts of the state, but even there, just very, very light, less than 1/10 of an inch type of amounts. Most of the state will be dry through the middle of next week, and also above normal, warmer than normal. Our high temperatures, by the way, I haven't talked specifically about that. We will be considerably or much above normal here today and tomorrow. Most low 80s far north to the upper 80s in the south for highs today, so warmer than yesterday, and then about the same tomorrow, and then a little bit of cooling for a couple degrees in the weekend into early next week. So by the time we get to the beginning of next week, probably looking at highs upper 70s north to low 80s. but warm, not as warm as today, but still definitely warmer than normal. Low temperatures, and this is another factor here. Notice that many areas made it up into the mid 80s yesterday for high temperatures, but our low temperatures this morning dropped back into the 50s. That's courtesy of low dew points and low humidity. And so the air right now, the air mass that we're in is fairly dry. That will continue. So we're not, even though the temperatures are up maybe mid to upper 80s today, the dew points are still in the 50s. It's going to be, well, as they say, a drier warmth or drier heat, and that will continue through the weekend. So low temperatures over the next several days, generally mid and upper 50s, with not much change even into next week. So very stable type of forecast here for the upcoming week. Water demand with the warm temperatures, relatively dry air, and with lots of sunshine will be above normal for the upcoming week. And daily average rates from, well, in the far north along the lakes, as low as a tenth of an inch per day, but more especially as you go south, looking at 1500s to maybe 1700s of an inch per day. So at least the demand for water because of these conditions will be elevated. That also suggests too for many of our crops now, which are senescing and maturing, and some even drying down, it'll be favorable for our field dry down rates for most of our annual crops. That should help with that weather scenario, should be beneficial in that regard. For the medium range time frame, still more of the same. Jet stream pattern here on the left-hand side, you can see over, this is for the 17th through the 21st, and you can see that big ridge persists. It's actually shifted a little bit to the east, but still with that big ridge, we're looking very, very high likelihood of warmer than normal mean temperatures, and most likely to normal to below normal precipitation totals. 8 to 14 days, very similar than this. And also, if we look beyond that, the warmer than normal theme is still there in most of the guides. Next week, we'll be looking at hopefully some new guidance for the long lead, but we do have La Nina conditions likely developing out in the Pacific, and talk about what that might mean here for our outlook. But at least for the near and medium future here for the next several weeks, warmer and probably a little drier than normal is certainly, especially the warmer than normal temperatures, looks like a very, very strong bet. And with that, I will wrap up. And this is one of the shortest summaries I think I ever remember writing, because it's essentially almost a car. Every day is identical, but fair, warm, dry through basically for much of the next week, and warmer than normal temperatures, above normal PET rates, et cetera, you can see here. And that's also really what we're looking at, probably even in the medium range. And with that, I will wrap up and summarize and introduce next week's speaker for virtual breakfast. This is next Thursday, the 19th, which is our last, hard to believe, our last virtual breakfast of the season. And good timing is Dr. Christy Sprigg will be with us. She'll be talking about late season weed control. So that's next week. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Phil to talk about RUP. Thanks.